Okay, good morning. Let me turn this fan off real quick. I did not even realize it was on until it was on. Well, until we went live. Let me put my AirPod on here. Okay. Um, Looks like we got two people on, or one if I'm the other one, but it said 0 when I came on, so I think there's two people. So if y'all want to message me or on the live comment, let me know how the sound and the stream is, if it's laggy or anything. Let me know. I changed up the lighting and kind of, we were here, went here, to add a little more personality and complexity. You know, the studio lighting thing that I had, definitely like, made my face and everything pop, but something about it just, when I turned it, because I like had it on, I had everything set up, and when I turned it off, I was just like, oh, just felt a little more at peace and centered. So I was like, you know what, for now we're gonna do this, but this will probably be the last one I do with a white wall. I'm trying to find another backdrop that has a little more personality to it, and the lighting's a little bit better. This room is on the back side of the house, so in the morning the sun comes up here. We've got some trees right here that are lit, that are allowing sun to come in, but most of the sun comes in on the front end, so I have to try to work with that. But anyways, good morning. It is it Sunday? Did I get it right today? It is. It's Sunday morning. So, yeah. All right, my friend Johnny, who I think is watching, just texted me and said he can't comment because he doesn't have the YouTube app. Well, then get the YouTube app, Johnny. But anyways, so yeah, Sunday up in Port Orchard. It's 9:00 per usual. Good morning, Mom. Let me know if the video and sound is good. I'm gonna go ahead and type in here. Please comment. There we go. Maybe we'll see if that elicits any more comments. I haven't been blowing people's phones up just because I'm trying to mitigate who wants to know that I'm going live and who doesn't really care, and all of that stuff. So yeah, I think people are viewing this more now after I go live, and probably will, which is fine. I'd just rather not pester people about it. So anyways, thanks, Mama. All right, well, let's get going. I feel like I had something I wanted to say about yesterday. I don't remember what it was. Usually I put a note on my phone about it, and I forgot to. Okay. Curtis. I'll put Curtis's name back in here. Johnny said, I'm a minimalist. I have extra abs. Oh, I don't know if y'all heard that. It was someone starting up their motorcycle. All right. Curtis had a few that he sent me. All of them were really good. And not surprising. Definitely things that I know are on Curtis's mind often. And for those of y'all that don't know Curtis, especially if you live in Washington, he forget what his like really clever name is for what he does now. But he's a really gifted muscle therapist, strength coach, kind of like all around holistic guy that really focuses in on what parts of your body are kind of inactive and not moving, and bringing everything into balance, and then strengthening the parts of your body that need to be strengthened, whether it's for sports and training, or just for everyday function. So, and I may be actually not giving you the most accurate perspective of what he does, but check him out, Curtis Clay Fitness. He's got a YouTube channel, he's got Instagram, and he is just a super inspiring person, and one of my best friends, one of my longest friends that I'm have remained very close to, and he's also just an incredible person, and has a really amazing wife, which he would say is most of the reason he's amazing. Maybe not most of the reason, but a big reason. And has some beautiful children. Okay, I had it and then it disappeared. I'm sorry. Curtis, the first one were words and the power of them. Words and the power of them. I'll apologize ahead of time. My brain feels pretty jumbled right now. It may take me a little bit to get into a little bit of a reflective flow and headspace, but that's what we're here for. The first thing I'll say is, for probably all of my 20s, I thought I had words figured out. I thought I understood words really well and the role that they played in my life and other people's life, even from kind of a linguistic standpoint, and down to the kind of like basic relationship as humans that we have with words. I've got to figure out how to turn Siri off. She just popped up and goes, like, I'm listening. And then started recording what I was saying. It's funny. But anyways, I thought I had words kind of figured out and understood, even at a really basic level, the relationship that we had with them. And kind of my really like fixed view on that for a long time was that they're just containers, and they're containers that we put meaning and ideology into and kind of pass across to each other. And I mean, it's not like I don't hold to that view, but I was listening to Maya Angelou talk about words, and there were a couple of different talks that I heard her do on words themselves and the power of words. And she said a lot of things that really challenged my fixed view on the way that I understood and related to words. The biggest one was she thinks that eventually in the future we'll be able to have such an understanding of certain words that we'll be able to measure the power of them. And the way that Maya talks about words is almost as if they have their own life to them themselves, their own soul in a way. And it's a much more mystical approach with that, which I enjoy anyways. When she said it, and she kind of opened me up to thinking, well, you maybe have an aspect of words figured out, but there's so much more. There's so much more going on and so much more happening. And she talks about it like the words that we speak that come out of our mouth paint the walls in the spaces that we surround ourselves with. Like they actually like stick, and there's energy to them that when we say them out, even if there's no one in a room, they get into the walls, they get into the fabric of our lives and have an impact. And this was, I think, really important because I was just so in my head. Any kind of reflection I was doing or process I was doing on the way I related to language and words was all up here. And that kept me from actually having a more embodied experience with words. And when that shifted, I think I was kind of brought back to a lot of my roots, which I would say are grounded more in mysticism. And I've since then been able to pay a lot more attention to the energy that's behind my words and the power that's behind them, the impact that they have, and not just the ideological substance that's in them, and the feelings that are behind them, to the point now where I feel like the most important thing for me anyways is to really get into the space with words where I'm first really conscious of like how I'm feeling and what's going on in my soul, and understanding that kind of internal state that I'm in is actually going to have a lot of impact on the words that come out of my mouth in a way that I may not even be conscious of. And hopefully the more I become aware and mindful in my life, the more I will be conscious of those things. But I think we've all been in situations where someone's saying something, but you can feel all of this subtext underneath it, where you almost don't even believe what they're saying, and that they're saying what they're saying, or they have an ulterior motive for saying what they're saying. They don't actually mean what they're saying, but there's this whole subversive thing going on. And not that it's my responsibility to, read their mind and figure all that out, but it is my responsibility for taking ownership of that within myself. Like, how am I using my words? How much integrity is there? Um, and so that's kind of the priority number one, is kind of checking my internal state and what's going on there and what's motivating the kind of outflow of me opening my mouth and making sounds and formulating, different things, and kind of like stripping it down to that act of opening my mouth, making sounds, those sounds going out into an environment, having an impact. I'm sure at this point most people have heard of these studies where they've had plants, and one plant they're yelling at, and one plant they're just loving and being really kind to, and it just changes the way that they grow. So we've been able to, on some level, scientifically prove this, but we also know what it feels like to have someone who's just emanating and kind of glowing with radiance and love and kindness and peace. And when they speak, you can feel that come out of their mouth, versus someone that is really tight and angry and pessimistic, and just has this really kind of tight, intense, aggressive energy to them. And they can say the nicest thing in the world in the context of what they're saying, but when it comes out, it doesn't feel that way. So for me, that's kind of priority number one. And then the second thing is I like to be really strategic with my words. I think it's really fun. I think one, it's really fun, and I think two, it's really loving. It's a loving act to say, okay, who's my audience, and how are the words that I'm going to use impact them, and sit with them and land with them, and is what I'm wanting to communicate going to be received in the ways that I want it to be received. And that type of like thoughtfulness, I think, can be a really powerful act of love that we don't even have to overtly communicate and be loud about, but just know that we're doing it, know why we're doing it, and do it. So that would probably be the next shell of importance for me with words, is really taking the time to understand my audience and think about it. And I don't always practice that well, but it's definitely a value. Yeah, and then I think the other thing that I'll say with this, and then my mom put some comments, so I'll read those, is the challenge that I'm in right now is I feel like I use way more words than I need to in life. I have this internal feeling right now where if I say more, then I'll be able to accomplish more with my words. And especially when I'm in an excited place or I've had lots of coffee. And I'm really wanting to move to a place where I can use less words and say more and communicate more with the least amount of words. one, I feel like that slows me, that process of like moving into that space slows me down enough to be present with the words. But it's also just, it's a creative process. When we're creative and we give ourselves kind of like guidelines to work within, there's a certain thing that happens where we're problem solving to figure out how to work within those boundaries. And so for this context with words, for me to say I'm going to try to say what I want to say with the least amount of words, or I want to try to tell this story without, that's kind of my thing. It's like, I want to try to tell the story, do this thing without using all of these words, and kind of oversaturating the environment that I'm in without allowing there to be empty space and negative space. And I think having those moments where there's pauses and reflections and carefulness and a slower cadence just allows for a richer experience with the words, instead of me just like spinning. That's the best thing I know. It's like, I feel like when I'm using tons of words, I'm like on the hamster wheel and I'm just running around and around and around, and I'm not necessarily progressing anywhere. And if I am, it's not very quickly. Whereas if I can slow down and use less words, I think I'll be able to actually move in the direction that I want to go more effectively, instead of just spinning and staying in one place, which can be fun. You know, Robin Williams did it really well, like really, really well. He created a whole art form out of just this spontaneous, in the moment, really quick, abrupt. And it's beautiful. And so I think there's a place for that. But most of the time when I use words, I want to try to slow down and be more intentional with it, and try to paint more beautifully with fewer words. So let's see. Mom said words are things. You must be careful about calling people out of their names, using racial pejoratives and sexual pejoratives and all that ignorance. Don't do that. Someday we'll be able. Oh, she's quoting the Maya Angelou. Okay, so here's the Maya quote. Words are things. We must be careful about calling people out of their names, using racial pejoratives and sexual pejoratives and all that ignorance. Don't do that. Someday we'll be able to measure the power of words. I think they are things. They get on the walls. They get in your wallpaper. They get in your rugs, in your upholstery, in your clothes, and finally into you. That's the Maya quote. Yeah, so that was a huge paradigm shift for me, out of this kind of box that I had words in, where I literally in my mind were viewing them as almost boxes, into actually viewing them as things that had life, and actually the life of them in a lot of ways was impacted by the relationship that people have with those words in their own lives and collectively, in a culture. The other thing that's really interesting is, as I've traveled, I've realized that I've realized so much more about words, and things that are really hard would take me a lot longer to reflect on, because the experiences are bigger than I have the ability to kind of communicate about. But one of the things is that the culture is carried in the language. When you show up to a new culture, there's this sense that the language that they use and the words they use somehow carry the culture that they carry. And there's almost this endless amount of substance that's beyond ideology, that's beyond feelings as far as like emotional feelings. There's all this nuance and impression in the depth of the language. And for me, I don't even have a desire right now anyways to like go in and parse all that out and dissect it and understand what all that is. Just kind of take it in raw and experience it. And if I reflect on it at all, try to do it in more poetic ways. So yeah, that's the other thing. I'll tell a story, and then unless anyone has any thoughts or comments or opinions, I'll end it there. But I was an Uber and Lyft driver for probably about a year and a half in Portland when I first got there. And I was probably about 2 or 3 years of like really getting into poetry and really enjoying poetry. And I had a couple poets that I really loved, and one, his name is David White. And interestingly enough, he actually lives just north of where I'm staying right now. He lives in Whidbey Island, and I'm south in Port Orchard, which is kind of cool. But I got turned on to him through actually I'm mixing things up. I had randomly heard a TED talk of his and didn't realize it. I had been reading like Rumi and what was the guy who did Letters to a Young Poet? Can't think of his name right now, but I'd been getting into them. But I had this, I had started developing this really personal relationship with poetry. And I just totally messed this story up. That's so great. Anyways, I was driving for Uber and Lyft one night, and I picked this family up. And the mother of the family gets in the passenger seat, and the father and the 2 children get in the back seat, which is very not normal. I mean, I'm fine with it. It was great, but I was like, okay, this is interesting. And so I start talking to them. I can already tell at this point I had been driving for a while, so you learn how to kind of feel the climate of what's happening out pretty quickly. And I could tell that this was a unique ride, that I wasn't going to get a lot of rides like this. And there was a certain life to their family. And there was it was pretty clear that they were from out of town. So there was a reason why they were here. And so I started just talking to him, asking him questions, and come to find out, she was the assistant of a poet who was in town and speaking the next day, and her family was traveling with her, and that was her whole job, was just to be an assistant to this poet. And so she started, and then she was Siri popped up again. She was kind of throwing the ball back in my court and asking me about my life. And I told her, I said, I'm at this point in my life where I'm pretty sure that the poets are the closest thing we have is like gateways to truth, to like real truth. And she goes, really? Why do you say that? So I started kind of unpacking why I felt that way and thought that way. And then I started asking her about the the poet and what does he do? And she said, well, he's involved in like leadership circles and he does corporate stuff. But he's also a poet and writes poetry and, does these gatherings with people. And he's got different kind of sides to his role as a poet. So she's telling me about that. And she's like, if you'll come tomorrow, I'll get you in for free. And I don't think she thought I was actually going to show up, but I showed up, and sure enough, she did. She sent me home with some stuff too, and it was David White. It was this guy that I had seen a TED Talk on. I didn't realize it was the same person, and he just got up, and most of it was just out of pure memorization, but he would recite 2 or 3 poems, and then we would break out into groups. And it was a really beautiful experience. It was the beginning of me developing this really large appreciation for Dave as both a poet and philosopher, and how he merges those two things, and the way that he's even been able to use the landscape of language to affect corporations in really beautiful and positive ways. And so yeah, that's been a whole journey of my relationship with poetry, of realizing that there's so much about the human experience that is true, that I feel like the poets are really the only ones that have figured language out and words out, and give us these kind of doorways into experience that we really can't get any other place. And the way that they have figured out how to use words is almost like this. It's almost like this magical algorithm or something, in the way that they relate to it and do it, and it's not from the head. It's in this really soulful place, kind of in the same way a really beautiful jazz musician just is playing jazz straight from their soul. I think there's a way to use words in that way that is almost beyond intentionality. I think we can start with intentionality, but then you get into that space where you start painting with words, and it's a whole different experience. So anyways, let's see if I want to say anything else on words right now. Looks like there's a few people on, so if y'all have any thoughts on any of this, I would love to hear it. Let's see if there's anything else I want to say. I think more than enough. Cool. I feel like I didn't do that topic the justice that I could have, but that's okay. I think that the real win for me right now is just getting into a regular rhythm of doing these, and just fine tuning and kind of building and developing as I go. but words are super important to me. I probably haven't done a lot of intentional reflection on words, so this was me kind of doing that live and trying to put that together. So Curtis, I hope that was at least somewhat enjoyable. Curtis uses words really well. He has an insane amount of integrity, and you can tell that they're important to him. He loves looking words up and learning about new words and researching words, and so he's really powerful and intentional with the way that he uses them, and people know, they can feel it. And so it was no surprise that was a topic that you picked, Curtis. All right, love you guys. You'll have a beautiful Sunday, and hopefully I'll see you tomorrow morning.